We're going to have to come up with answers that set politics aside.
Oh,
they don't hear us.
We're going to bring you some stuff that's going to make you feel better. They don't hear us.
they don't hear us.
Hey, and shout out to the folks who are covering this coalition, because they don't hear us.
Hi, my name is Halima, and I'm your host for They Don't Hear Us. And this evening, we have a special guest from NAACP. Could you please share your name with us and tell us about your organization?
Thank you so much, Halima, for the opportunity to be here. My name is Timothy Hughes, and I am the first vice president for the Nashville Branch of the NAACP. We are the oldest civil rights organization in the country, and for the last 105 years, we've been here in the city of Nashville, providing opportunity, providing inspiration and hope for folks who are trying to fight for liberation and justice and freedom for all communities. Our focus, of course, is the Black community, but we want to make sure that we are helping to raise all of the opportunities and raise concerns and issues that are impacting the lives of all people in the city of Nashville. As a civil rights organization, we center the needs and the concerns of the most vulnerable and the most marginalized. So those who have been impacted by the criminal legal system are very important people for us, but also those who are fighting for justice in housing and in healthcare, in education, making sure that every voice is heard and every person is seen as fully human and is uplifted and is considered to be valuable and important in our society. So we've been providing that service and that support for 105 years in the city of Nashville, and we're hoping to continue to do that.
Wow, that's amazing. So can you share what inspired you to get involved with the NAACP?
Thank you so much. I think my inspiration comes from so many leaders who have come before us, people like John Lewis and Diane Nash, people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who were instrumental in the work of the civil rights movement, but also the founders of the NAACP, like folks like W.E.B. Du Bois, who was from Great Barrington but went to school at Fisk University right here in Nashville, Tennessee. They're the luminaries of our history who really remind us of the fact that the fight for justice and liberation is an ongoing struggle. And it's one that we all can play a part in contributing to and making better. But of course, those examples, those luminaries, while important to me, my grandmother in particular, who was president of the Point Coupee Parish branch of the NAACP back home in Southeast Louisiana, was an example of someone who made a contribution to her community. She only had an 8th grade education, but she made sure that her children and her grandchildren had greater opportunities for success, for education, for a better way of life than she had. And so I remember growing up with my grandmother, accompanying her as she went to vote at the polling place. She was fully in her 60s before she had an opportunity to really be able to use the franchise. And so it's important that we remember how important it is for us to engage in the process, to be educated civically, and if we have the opportunity to be able to vote. But it's also very important that we remember the life, the legacy, and the sacrifice of so many people who came before us, who fought diligently for that right, and that we don't take it for granted, because in this moment, as we are preparing both for election season and for the fights that are to come in 2025 and beyond, we've got to steady ourselves and remember that history, and also remember that the ongoing fight for civic and human rights is one that we've got to all fight for in our generation. And so whether we're doing it at the ballot box when we're voting for candidates, or we're organizing in the streets, demanding liberation, freedom, and justice for those who have been impacted by the criminal legal system or who are attacked by police violence, we've got to make sure that we keep the examples of those luminaries, the Dr. Martin Luther Kings and the Diane Nashes, but also of our grandmothers and grandfathers and forebears who fought for us to have the opportunity to be able to vote and to participate in the process.
Awesome. Now, I heard you mention your grandmother. In addition to her, who else would you say was your biggest influence, and what lessons did they teach you?
So I grew up in Southeast Louisiana. I was born and raised in Baton Rouge. And when I was growing up, my mother was a school teacher. My father was a military veteran and later worked in law enforcement. I grew up in kind of a working class neighborhood, And there were about 10 of us in the neighborhood, little knucklehead kids running around, sometimes getting into good trouble and sometimes not so good trouble. But I had the opportunity to go away to college at Fisk University, and in the summer that I went back to visit my hometown, many of my friends and loved ones, those 10 friends that I grew up with, I was the only one who was still alive. Everybody else was either doing a long stretch in prison or was in the cemetery. And at 22 years old, that shouldn't be something that is a lived reality, but is, unfortunately, an experience for so many young black people. I wasn't the smartest, I wasn't the most capable, I was very fortunate, but to be in a situation where I was the only one that was still alive, it weighed upon me to make sure that I made a contribution to society, that I made a difference, and that I did what I could to make sure that other young black boys and young black men acculturating to manhood had examples to live up to. There were struggles along the way and challenges that I faced, but I never forgot the fact that my grandmother, in her wisdom as a community organizer in her local context, made sure that people in her neighborhood had their needs met, their material needs met. And every holiday season, she made sure that there was a gumbo supper that everybody in the neighborhood could come and benefit from. And so that kind of lived example taught me so much about why it's so important to give back to the community, and even when you have very little, to make sure that she reminded me that even if we only have little, we have enough to share. So it's important that we share with other members of the community and that we support them. But it's also important that we remember, even when we look at historic examples of community organizing. I think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the importance of understanding the material conditions of the communities where we organize. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If you can show them that they are valuable, that they're important, that their humanity and their significance is not tied up in their wealth or in their circumstance or in the race that they are or the experiences that they're having or the region of the country in which they live, but just by virtue of the fact that they're human beings, they matter and they're important, then people gravitate to that. And it's not as difficult to ask them about why they're not voting or to get them registered to vote. It's not difficult to get them to plug in and be engaged around education and healthcare and issues that are important to them because they understand their value and their power. And so if you can tap into that and inspire people to engage, I think you can really move the needle in terms of civic engagement. We've been trying to do that for the last 115 years at the NAACP and here in Nashville for 105. It's not easy work, though. People are facing very significant challenges. We've just come out of a very significant global pandemic where a lot of folks who were already impacted by health concerns had those concerns exacerbated by COVID, and then of course being forced to socially isolate. Some people have become socially disconnected. So it's about being able to meet people where they are and bring them back into the fold of community. But it's also about making sure that we check on our loved ones, our family members and friends who may have been socially isolated and those who have been impacted by health concerns, because a lot of folks are really struggling right now. In 2024, the rate of poverty, the costs of living and inflation are all going up. So it's just important for us to be able to give folks grace and help them to be able to make through their day. Make the most of their day and make it through the challenges that they experience on a day-to-day basis. What the NAACP tries to do is to be a clearinghouse of information. So if you need a ride to the poll, we try to make sure that we provide those rides to the poll. If there are folks who are impacted by the criminal legal system who have lost the right to vote, being able to amplify their voices and encourage others to get out to the polls and vote until we can get their voting rights restored. But also making sure that our young people are reading at grade level by the time that they're in third grade is an educational priority that should be something that is of concern to all of us, but certainly is of concern for folks like the NAACP who are trying to provide access and opportunity to equitable educational opportunities. And then finally, what we want to make sure we're doing is we are making sure that we provide access to the kinds of resources that are available to communities that need it. Here in Nashville, Tennessee, we have a very, very significant housing affordability crisis. So being able to plug people in with organizations and groups that can provide them with relief and support if they need assistance with rental help, or if they need to identify places that are affordable. While we may not be able to connect every single person in Nashville with a home, we can try to give people opportunities to have ladders of access out of poverty and into opportunity. And so we try to do that when and where we can.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So you spoke on like different things that the NAACP are doing. Are there any specific major projects that you all are currently working on that you'd like to speak about?
Absolutely. And so we don't do this work in silo. We do it in partnership with other local organizations and groups who are doing similar work. And so when we're working around healthcare, we try to partner with organizations and groups that are advocating for health issues and expansion of Medicaid, for example, in the state legislature. We're also working in partnership with some of our local schools, making sure that students are reading at grade level. So working with groups like Nashville Propel, working with educational entities and organizations that are providing, assistance and resources. There are freedom schools that are happening here locally in the city, and so we try to partner with some of the organizations who are doing that work and providing access and educational opportunity to young people even outside of the classroom through community centers and the like. We also have partnerships with organizations that are doing work around violence interruption and alternatives to policing. Groups like Gideon's Army are doing a lot of important and significant work in the North Nashville community, and our offices are located and situated in North Nashville. So we try to do what we can in the areas where we have influence. But lately, we've also been exploring educational opportunities in partnership with groups like the National Action Network, who's doing a lot of work around civic education, educating community members about the issues that are important to them, connecting them with resources that can help provide access to elected officials and other folks who are doing community organizing work, and then helping folks to advocate for the issues that are important to them. We have a day on the Hill at the state legislature and also in the city council, where we're meeting with our lawmakers and holding them accountable to the issues that matter to us. We're also doing court watch at some of the local courthouses to make sure that we're observing the actions that are happening, because so many of our people who are caught in the criminal legal system don't have people passionately advocating for them. So we want to be present to let lawmakers and judges and other officials in the courtroom know that we're there for our people, and we want to make sure that they get the proper representation and support.
Okay. So what impact do you hope these projects will have in the community?
I think that one of the things that we encounter among community members, particularly those folks who feel like their voice is not heard, or like their significance or their importance is not being felt in the halls of power, is to educate them about the power that they do have. Here in the city of Nashville, on the local level especially, in our city council, in our school boards, it's tremendously impactful to have folks advocating on behalf of issues and concerns that are of importance to them. And in the electoral sense, particularly, we have local elected officials who are being elected by very, very narrow margins in some of these cases. Particularly in the city council election. I tell people all the time, in 2019, there was a first-time black woman who was a former educator and administrator elected to the city council in the city of Nashville by 25 votes. There are maybe 25 people in your phone, in your Rolodex. You got more than 25 social media connections. If you can get all of those people moving in a direction, you can influence policy. And in the case of the city council, that's one person on a 40-person council, which is important because that's impacting a nearly $4 billion budget for the city. Those are resources that can be allocated to the needs and the concerns that we have as members of the community. And if we are participating in that process, we can have power and influence over how those decisions are made. So having that level of understanding of the power that we do have and being able to leverage that power collectively as a branch, as a unit, as a community is very important to us at the NAACP. And I think that it gives us an opportunity to really have some influence over the kinds of decisions that are happening in our lives.
Okay. Now, Timothy, you're doing some amazing work with your organization, with NAACP. How would you measure your success with the work that you are doing currently?
I appreciate that question because I think that it points back to the fact that the things that are important to us, if they truly are important to us, we need to measure them. We need to measure the impact, we need to measure the areas of improvement, and we need to think very critically about whether these decisions that are being made about us are being done without us. And we should never allow decisions to be made about us without us. And so the way that we are measuring that is we're working in partnership with organizations and groups like the Tennessee Justice Coalition, which has a dashboard that talks about things related to health care and health access in the state of Tennessee. And we're specifically seeing some concerning data around health outcomes, particularly for maternal health. In the Black community, we have very significantly concerning issues related to child and infant mortality and also maternal health. And so we've got to do more to make sure that at the beginning process, whenever individuals are needing access to health care, that health care is made available to them. In the state of Tennessee specifically, we need to be expanding opportunities and avenues to proper health care. So connecting people with doulas, connecting people with programs and institutions that provide resources and support for young people and also for birthing persons to make sure that they have what they need when they're having children is going to be critical. And so those require investment and priorities. It also requires us to hold accountable the lawmakers who claim to represent our interests. And so it's about raising those concerns around infant mortality and health care for all people, including those producing children and bearing children, because right now many of those things are under attack. We were talking during the break about the conversation that we were having about Project 2020 and some of the very significant concerns that we have in this electoral environment where the Project 2020 program, which essentially was a program that was created by the Conservative Heritage Foundation that has been very closely associated with some of the proposals by one of the candidates currently running for president. And by the time this airs, an election will be held to determine exactly what will be happening at every level of government, from the presidency and the Congress all the way down to the state legislative and local county races. But it's important that people understand and educate themselves about Project 2025, which is a proposal that is seeking to radically change a lot of the elements of how it is that services are provided and how it is that resources are allocated in our community. I'll give one good example of that as it relates to health care. There are efforts being made right now to expand access to things like Medicaid in the state of Tennessee. And those processes are being stymied by efforts to try to privatize the system. When we privatize systems and take the government completely out of them, it removes a measure of accountability, and that happens with health care, it happens with education, it happens with the criminal legal system. One of the proposals in the Project 2025 program would essentially expand access to a process called qualified immunity. That's a fancy way of saying essentially that when we had the 2020 uprisings in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others at the hands of law enforcement, there were mechanisms in place from the Justice Department and through the criminal legal system to prosecute even police officers who were abusing their authority in the way that they were enacting law enforcement in our cities. If the Project 2025 program is enacted, that kind of mechanism for processing and investigating police officers for misconduct would be completely removed. The agency responsible for that, the Department of Justice, essentially would be underfunded to the point of obsolescence and insignificance. And that kind of issue would be very, very concerning, particularly when we're considering the fact that we've got to have mechanisms for accountability for law enforcement to make sure that community members feel safe. We've got to do everything that we can to educate community members both about Project 2025 and about ways in which they can be a part of and participate in oversight of law enforcement in their community, making sure that everybody feels safe and that we are promoting a sense of public safety that actually relates to the experiences of all people and not just some. And organizations like the NAACP are at the front line and are trying to make sure that every member of the community has a sense of purpose and connection and feels like they are being heard as it relates to all of the decisions that impact their lives.
Okay. Okay, earlier you mentioned that you all are working with Nashville Propel and Gideon's Army. Are there other organizations in the community that you know that the NAACP would be effective with working within the community?
Absolutely. I think that the work that groups like the National Action Network are doing, they are also a similarly aligned civic organization aligned around the issue of civil rights. Organizations and groups that prioritize the education and the uplift of Black communities, like our fraternities and sororities. The NPHC organizations have done incredible work around galvanizing people, getting them engaged and educated to be able to participate civically in voting and other forms of activity around our issues. I think we also lean very heavily on relationships with the faith community. So many of the Black churches here in Nashville and in other parts of Middle Tennessee have been very, very helpful in helping us to give a moral thrust to a lot of the issues and the concerns that we have around civic education, and they have been very, very helpful in supporting our efforts to collectively work together to make sure that Black people from all over the city are working together. But we need to do more. We need to continue to build those partnerships and those relationships. There are a number of newer organizations, groups like the Equity Alliance that does work around civic education and voter registration for Black women and for Black communities. Groups like the Black Nashville Assembly and the Southern Movement Committee have been very instrumental in educating young people about the power and the importance of civic education, and they've won some significant gains with their varsity spending plan that centers needs and concerns around public safety for young people and creating an office specifically dedicated to providing resources and support for young people. Because often what happens is when young people are not centered in the solutions that are being proposed and they fall through the cracks, they end up falling into the hands of the criminal legal system, which is not really a benefit to them and is certainly not a benefit to our community. And so we want to make sure that we're giving as many pathways into prosperity and out of poverty as possible. And so those are just a few of the organizations locally that we have been partnering with, but we are also, looking to partner with any other organizations that are doing work that is going to uplift and benefit our communities in meaningful and significant ways. And we're certainly have our hands open to the work of doing that collective organizing and community development.
Okay. Now let's talk about you. How do you see yourself evolving over time?
I think that I've been doing the work of community organizing in one capacity or other for a large stretch of my life now, probably about 10 years as a professional. And one of the things that I've learned is that you've got to understand that you don't know everything about community organizing. You never really stop learning as a part of this process. And when we're centering the needs and the concerns of our community, we have to understand that our communities are often experiencing trauma. And we've got to have a trauma-informed and a trauma-centered and a trauma-understanding approach when we're addressing the needs and the concerns of our community members. As we are collectively healing together, envisioning the creation of possibility for ourselves, we've got to be able to bridge the gap between what it is that we have and what it is that we need. And often our communities know best what it is that we need. And so we need to listen to them. We need to understand and amplify the voices of those who are most impacted, because the people who are closest to the problems are often closest to the solutions. Mm-hmm. And then the thing that I think is most important for me is to understand that my role as a leader within the NAACP and as a part of this crucible of learning that we're building together is that I'm there both to learn and to teach. And I think every member of the community has something unique and interesting and creative and special that only they can contribute to movement, only they can contribute to the work that we're doing. And so we try to create space and opportunity for those folks to discover that about themselves and to plug in with organizations and groups that allow them to be able to do that exploration and that development together. And so NAACP is certainly one of those organizations, and I would encourage folks to get plugged in with the work that we're doing at the Nashville Branch. But by all means, don't do this work in a silo. If I could give any recommendation to those who are listening, I would say make sure that you're plugged in with an organization or group. Connect with one of these organizations that have been mentioned, or start your own organization as a way to be able to work collectively, because the work that we do, many hands make light work. And so if we can do that work together, we can really have a significant impact. But I think finally the thing that I will say is that we need to make sure that we are doing the work of community building with community and not just for community, because folks want to be able to collaborate and build with you. We don't bring solutions to the community. We work collaboratively with the community to create the kinds of solutions that we want to have.
Okay. So could you quickly tell me what qualities do you think are essential for effective community leadership?
I think that one of the primary skills that I've learned as a community leader is to listen. You want to listen twice as much as you speak. You were given 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Definitely.
I think it's also important to have a heart for service. A lot of people who work in community organizing have been through trauma themselves, so you got to make sure that you have done your healing work in order to be able to not exacerbate the traumas that are happening in the community and to not re-traumatize yourself. And then finally, you got to understand that you got to pour from an empty. I'm sorry, you can't pour from a full cup. So you got to be able to do that self-care. And that's something that I think a lot of folks who work in community organizations or who do community-related work are often, very stretched thin. So it's important to be able to understand the boundaries, your challenges, and to be able to work within those boundaries so that you are not burning yourself out. So we do that in collaboration. We do that in community. We do self-care, and we make sure that we show up for the communities in the ways that they ask us to show up. And be reliable and supportive of those community leaders who are already there so that you can provide them with the support that they need.
Perfect. So you lead me to my final question. Speaking on personal motivation, what keeps you motivated and committed to your work?
I think that for me, the motivation comes from seeing the amazing and incredible work that has already been laid out. We've inherited a tremendous legacy at the NAACP. There are a number of leaders who are leaders of civil rights movements, leaders of liberation movements who have come through the NAACP and have been connected to that legacy. So I'm motivated to continuing to carry the torch a little bit further in my time and then to pass the torch on to young people who are acculturating to the work. We've got to be thinking about the legacy that we are leaving to those who are coming behind us, because those who created that legacy thought about us as we were coming. So as we're visioning that possible world and we're thinking about the future and what it looks like, it's got to be a future that includes all of us, because that's the work that is, I think, of our generation, and whether that's around elections, whether it's around community organizing and community development, it really has to be something that centers an understanding of the historic legacy that we've inherited and our role to play in continuing that legacy.
Thank you, Timothy. I appreciate everything that you share with us. I appreciate the work that you're doing in our community. You are amazing. And this will end this episode. Thank you for joining They Don't Hear Us.
Thank you.
Those who are outdated with vernaculated thoughts. So every time I take a turn, MCs take a loss. My point across, I gotta get to where I wanna be. As the wickedest public speaker since 73 or 74, which was the year I first touched ground. As the physical manifestation of sight and sound. So gather round to hear the profound brown vomiter. Absorb the sonic energy manifesting through your monitor. Delivering proof, I make the truth sound clear. Mr. Man the 9 Ether represent right here. Check it out. Once in a lifetime like a Halley's Comet. Yo, we bring it to Medina like the Prophet Muhammad.
What's up? What's up? My name is Dawn, and guess what? We on They Don't Hear Us.
Hey, I'm Halima Amal L. Found out there's a Channel 10 where They Don't Hear Us is being televised. Check us out.
On the what?
Hey!
NAACP Network.
Hey!